What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue here with my 2024 college football schedule preview and projected record series. Up next are the Oregon Ducks. Before we preview this team's schedule for 2024 and give them an early projected record based on how tough their schedule is, let's take a look at what Oregon did back in 2023. Here were my projections and predictions last year for the Oregon Ducks. You see my projection had them at 10-2, but my prediction for this team last year was 9-3, but Oregon did much more better than that compared to the projections and predictions from last year. This team went 11-1, of course. Went to the Pac-12 championship, but if you count the Pac-12 championship loss and also the bowl game victory in the New Year's Six Bowl against Liberty, this team finished with an overall record of 12-2 last season, and this was also their final year, of course, as a Pac-12 conference team. They are officially going to the Big Ten this year in 2024. Here was that schedule last year for Oregon in 2023. You look at their non-conference schedule. They played Portland State, Texas Tech on the road, and Hawaii here, so they didn't have a tough non-conference schedule. That Texas Tech game was a pretty close one, but they were able to escape that, place with a victory and everything. And like I said, Oregon, they did lose in the regular season here to Washington on the road, but they did also lose in the Pac-12 championship game also against Washington. So that was the only team that they lost to last year, and they did have some tough road games with Washington and Utah here on this schedule. They took care of business, though, against Utah, and they were pretty much dominant the rest of their games, except for that Washington game that was a loss for them. So again, Oregon, that was their final year, of course, in the Pac-12. Heading into 2024, they got some transfers coming in, and also Dylan Gabriel, the transfer from Oklahoma. He will be the starting quarterback definitely for this Oregon team, and they are also heading to the Big Ten in 2024. So now let's look ahead to 2024, and here is that schedule for the Oregon Ducks. Before we go game by game and preview each and every single individual game here on their schedule, let's take a look at who Oregon will play in the non-conference. So this is their non-conference schedule. Remember, no divisions, of course, in the Big Ten this year. You look at their non-conference schedule, they will play Idaho, Boise State, and then they'll play Oregon State here on the road. So you get 3 non-conference games here on the schedule for Oregon. You look at this non-conference schedule, Idaho is kind of considered a cupcake game. Boise State, though, is not considered a cupcake game in my opinion. I think this is a really good Boise State team coming in as of right now in 2024. They're a pretty good group of 5 team, pretty good Mountain West team, but, Oregon plays them at home. They should still be a big favorite against this team. And then they play, of course, their rival Oregon State. It's not a Pac-12 conference game anymore, obviously, and also they are switching things up, not playing it, of course, in rivalry weekend. They are playing it in the month of September, which we'll talk about in just a second. But again, with all these conference changes, a lot of these rivalries are still continuing, which I'm really happy about. So that's the non-conference schedule for Oregon here in 2024. Let's now go back to the original schedule here, and let's go game by game now and preview this schedule here for Oregon in 2024. So Oregon starts things off here with Idaho here on August 31st. Like I said, I think that's their only cupcake game here on the schedule in the non-conference. And then after that, it's Boise State here at home on September the 7th. Like I said, Boise State's a pretty good Mountain West team. Oregon is playing at home. They still should overall be a big favorite in this game. And then after that, it's Oregon State here on the road on September 14th. So like I just said, Oregon and Oregon State's rivalry is switching up here in the month of September, as a lot of rivalries in college football, except for a few of them. But they will play Oregon State here on the road on September the 14th. Again, not a Pac-12 conference game anymore. So Oregon will start things off with their 3 non-conference games here to kick off the season. So they could probably start out 3-0, maybe 2-1, depending on what happens in that rivalry game against Oregon State. And then after that, they get a bye week before playing UCLA on the road to open up Big Ten play on September the 28th. So you got back-to-back road games here in the month of September. And then they get to the month of October. They'll play Michigan State here at home on October the 5th. And then there's that big game at home on October 12th against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Big-time game coming up here. Of course, it's a Big Ten conference game. We can't call it a non-conference game anymore. Ohio State and Oregon don't have a lot of history with one another, but in the later years, they've had a lot of history with the national championship and also in that regular season game in 2021, which Oregon did win in Columbus. And this time, Oregon, 3 years later, they're going to be playing this game at home. So that would be a big one, top 10 showdown perhaps. And then they play Purdue here on the road here on October 19th. Then it's Illinois after that at home on October 26th to close things out here in the month of October. Then they get to the month of November. They'll play Michigan here, of course, on the road here on November 2nd. Going to be a very tough place to play, but other than that, it should be a pretty exciting game there on the road at Michigan. And then they play Maryland here at home on November 9th. And then it's Wisconsin here on the road on November 16th. And then they close things out here with Washington, of course, in rivalry week on November 30th. So like I said, they switched things up with Oregon State. Instead of playing Oregon State in rivalry week, they're playing Washington, of course, here in rivalry week on November 30th. This will be a home game here for Oregon, so that will, of course, get a bye week there before playing that game as well. So looking at the schedule here for 2024 for Oregon, it's a pretty tough one, but, playing on the road at Oregon State and UCLA are both pretty tough games on the road. Ohio State, of course, playing them at home is a really big deal, but at least they get this game at home at least. And then, of course, Michigan. That game is on the road as well, which is going to be a very tough place to play. But I don't think the schedule is really that too bad for Oregon, considering they have high expectations coming into 2024. Dan Lanning has done a really nice job for this program. So that is the schedule here for 2024. Let's now get to the projection here for this Oregon team. Remember, it's not my official prediction. This is simply a projection based on how tough the schedule is in 2024. And this is the scale I've been using here for my projection so far. It's a 1% game in the red. These are games where Oregon has no chance of winning in. 20% games in the orange. These are games where Oregon is going to be like about a touchdown, a couple touchdowns of underdogs in the orange. 40% games in the yellow. These are games where Oregon will be a heavy underdog in, about a touchdown. 50-50 games will stay in the white, games that can go either way. 60% games in the purple. These are games where Oregon will be favored by at least a touchdown. 80% games in the blue. These are games where Oregon will be favored by at least a couple of touchdowns. And then the green games, the 99% games, these are the easy wins here for Oregon. And that's the percentage we're going to start here with this projection here for Oregon. So let's start with the easy wins here for Oregon. I think you got two of them on this schedule, and that's Idaho and Boise State. The Idaho game, I think that's considered a cupcake game, to kick off the season. And then Boise State here, I was kind of, close to putting this one in the blue, but if it was on the road at Boise State, I would definitely put it in the blue, to be honest, because Boise State, like I said, is not a bad Group of 5 team. I think this game could be at least at 90% instead of over 95%. So I think, those are two easy wins here for Oregon. And I think they, could start out 2-0 with those two easy wins there at home against Idaho and Boise State. All right, how about the games in the blue? The games where Oregon will be favored by at least a couple of touchdowns. I think you got 4 of them on this schedule. You got Michigan State, Purdue on the road, Illinois at home, and then Maryland at home as well. I think Oregon's going to be a favorite at least by a couple touchdowns in all 4 of these games. Michigan State's a program that's not been really good in the last few years. They're kind of a program that's starting in a new direction with a new head coach and everything. Purdue on the road, that's a very tough place to play, but, I think they'll be able to be favored by a couple touchdowns as well. Purdue is also another program that really had a big step back last year with a first-year head coach. Illinois coming off a pretty average season last year, but, due to being Oregon, being a newcomer in the Big Ten and everything, the Big Ten conference is going to be a tough conference to play in. You never know what can happen in this type of conference, but Illinois and Maryland are both pretty similar teams. I think both of these games are going to be at least over 80%. So those are the 4 games where I think Oregon will be favored by at least a couple touchdowns in the blue. We now go to the purple games, the games where Oregon will be favored by at least a touchdown at 60%. I think you got 3 of them on this schedule: Oregon State on the road, UCLA on the road, and then Wisconsin here on the road as well. So I think all these road games here, I think Oregon will be at least favored by a touchdown because they're the more talented teams compared to these teams last year. Oregon State is, of course, a rivalry game. You never know what can happen, but I don't know what Oregon State's going to look like, and I think Oregon is the more talented team, and plus the game was not really close last year, so I think Oregon is the better team going into this one. UCLA on the road, I don't know what to expect from this team either heading into their first year, of course, in the Big Ten. It is a road game. That's why I got it in the purple, though. And then Wisconsin here on the road. I was very close to making this one a 50-50 game, but I'm going to stick with it and put it in the purple just because, Oregon was a very talented team last year, and Wisconsin still has a long way to go here with Luke Fickell as their head coach as well. So I think all 3 of these games you can favor Oregon by at least a touchdown, and because they're in the purple, it's just because they're on the road. So these 3 games here, Oregon will be favored by at least a touchdown in all three of these games. I don't have any underdog games for Oregon. I think they'll be pretty much competitive against all three of these teams that you're seeing in the white. I think all three of these games, Ohio State, Michigan, and Washington, are all 50-50 games in my opinion. Ohio State's a pretty big matchup, a top 10 showdown coming up pretty much, in 2024 if both of these teams don't slip up by this time, which both of these teams, of course, are playoff contenders, and also this is kind of like a playoff invocation game as well. But again, Oregon playing at home, that gives them the advantage a little bit. I think Oregon will be at least favored by a field goal. And then Michigan here on the road, I think Michigan will be favored by 3 points as well. But this is also a very tough game to call, especially playing on the road at Michigan. And then Washington here, I was very close to putting this game in the purple as well. But, Washington, of course, based off of where they were last year and beating Oregon in both the Pac-12 championship and also in the regular season, I'm going to stick that game and put it in the white. So all three of these games, I think Oregon will at least be favored by, or actually like it's a 50-50 game for all three of these games. All right, let's now get a projected record here for Oregon based on this schedule. Again, not my official prediction. This is simply a projection based off of how tough the schedule is. Looking at those 50-50 games, I think I can see them winning like 2 out of the 3 games here in the 50-50 range. Ohio State and Washington are both at home. Let's say they win both of those games and then, of course, lose to Michigan. But what if they lose to Ohio State and beat Michigan and Washington? That could be a very big change there. But I think the schedule really sets up nicely for Oregon to have a pretty good season. Let's now get to the projection here. So you can count those green games against Idaho and Boise State and those 4 blue games as wins. And then we split the purple games, and then we split the 50-50 games here. The overall projected record that you get for Oregon here in 2024 comes out to be 11-1 for Oregon. And like I said, I think the schedule really sets up nicely for Oregon to have a pretty good season. Like I said, those 50-50 games, I could see them winning at least 2 out of the 3 games because 2 out of the 3 you get, of course, both Ohio State and Washington at home. Michigan especially will be a tough one on the road. It wouldn't really shock me if Oregon goes undefeated in 2024. I could see their best case scenario being like 12-0. Worst case would probably be 10-2, maybe 9-3. I don't think 9-3 is going to be really possible for Oregon, though, because this team, I think, is going to be very talented this year. Dan Lanning will have a pretty explosive offense. I think he also has a pretty good defense as well. So this Oregon team, red hot coming into their first year, of course, in the Big Ten Conference. We'll see how they do, but this is my projection here for the Oregon Ducks in 2024. Again, it's 11-1 in 2024. So give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Who do you think? What do you think Oregon's projection will be in 2024? Do you agree or disagree? And also give me your best case scenario and worst case scenario for this Oregon team down in the comments below as well. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports Channel.